Hello. It's a while since I've done this, but here we go. Uh, this time I'm looking want to tell you more about the benefits of crafting because I've got something in mind. You see, I'm looking at doing a craft group called Broken Pencils. Can you see my whoops, wrong side. There we are. Can you see my t-shirt? On there, it has two pencils on it, both of which are broken. It's my new uniform for broken pencils. On there, yes, it's an interesting one. This, I'm looking at doing this thing there, and I was wanting to sort of remind people of the benefits of crafting. So I'm going to have a look at do something a bit strange. Ooh, can you see what those guys are doing? Now, that is that photograph is a little bit over 100 years old. Well, it will be because it's of World War I soldiers, so it will be at least 105 years old. She's somewhere between 105 and 110. Let's put it like that. So, what are these guys doing in bed? I mean, they've got got three men there, if you look carefully, and two lady nurses and three men, and the men are doing their knitting. Yes, you heard me right. They are doing their knitting, and it's strange because knitting was one of the tools that was used by the well by the I suppose as much by the propaganda people and the armed services to during World War I. Yep, it was there. You see, what happened was the soldiers needed something constructive to do. The nurses were already knitting. Well, at least this is the way I think it worked. The nurses were already doing their knitting because they were doing knitting bits and pieces for the comforts for the soldiers. They wanted something for the soldiers to do, the wounded soldiers to do while they were stuck in bed. So they taught them to knit, kept them gainfully occupied, and they were making comforts, and everybody was happy. And the other strange thing that's happened with knitting at about that time was that it became the well and truly it was well in fashion in the big cities like in the big cities in the States, places like New York and those sort of places. Knitting was the in thing. You see, what they were doing is the Red Cross were helping people get access to needles, even sometimes encouraging young lads. I mean, I found a photograph which I haven't put on here, of some young lads making knitting needles. Keeps them occupied a bit, doesn't it? Then there were people who made. Then there also had the yarn. Mrs. Wilson, the president's wife, well, she had this brilliant idea that they had all this grass at the White House, so she got them to keep the sheep. So they said, well, why don't we keep some sheep at the White House? And they had sheep on the lawn, which was then, of course, extra special sheep because it was presidential sheep, which they used to help raise money. Their fleeces raise money for the Red Cross. I mean, there's some crazy things going on, and there were many people who were doing when they had a break at work. The girls in the office who were taking a break from work. Well, what they would do is they would get their knitting out, and there were events where they would go to the park, and the Red Cross was there to support them with the help them get the patterns and there. So they had the Red Cross stall in the park where they could go and get the patterns, get the needles, get the wool, etc., and hand in the things that they'd made. And they would go to the park and they would sit and knit in the office, and there would be some people would go out to the park and sit and knit, and it became the patriotic thing to do to knit socks and scarves and helmets and mittens and those sort of comfort things that the army is not well known for providing to its soldiers. And they were sort of busy knitting. Well, you see, it helped a lot of people. I mean, it kept the knitting, the soldiers who were given knitting to do. Well, the wounded soldiers, I should say, who were given knitting. Well, they had the benefits of the occupational therapy. They could actually do something useful while they were in bed and make things for other soldiers, because they knew how the benefits of having all these little bits and pieces of woolly knitted bits. The hats and the scarves and the mittens and the helmets and I mean, I've seen, you look online and you see all sorts of patterns. So things like rifle mitts. They're sort of which have one finger, which have one thumb, one finger, one fit, one so like a glove would have one thumb, one finger, and the rest of the hand would be covered like a glove, so you could actually use it use it to fire your rifle while you were wearing your mitts. Interesting thought. There are all sorts of weird and wonderful things going on at that time, but the same is true today. Things like knitting and crochet, like a bit like the crochet I've got behind me, and making all sorts of things is still beneficial today. I mean, those soldiers are benefiting from the occupational therapy that they were receiving for the nurses. I'm sure those guys didn't mind having a nurse sitting near them, teaching them how to knit. I mean, that were keeping them company and helping them with their knitting. I'm sure the guys didn't mind that. Guys never do they? But I'm sure they didn't mind that. And they were sort of there, and it kept people there. See, what were the what was on the minds of these young women who came out of their offices and sat in the park? What was on their minds when they were there? Well, maybe it was the sweethearts that had gone off to war, or the brothers that had gone off to the war, or occasionally, possibly even the fathers, if they were young and their fathers were young when they had them. So they were looking at their relatives and friends and neighbours. They'd gone off to war. Oh well, what can we do to help them? Oh well, we'll do our knitting, and it was all seen as doing their bit and helping other people on there. And yeah, it was amazing just how it sort of worked out in there. And as much as anything, it distracted people. You see what was happening. If you're worried about brother, Uncle Joe who's on the Western Front, what would you do for Uncle Joe? Well, you'd make Uncle Joe a pair of mittens, wouldn't you? Better still, you might even make him a pair of rifle mittens. The ones with the one thumb and one finger, and the rest of them a mitten. You do things for them. It was sort of your way of supporting them, your way of supporting the troops, your way of doing things. But of course, it kept you distracted. I mean, very clever. All this stuff on there, and say it distracted the population, gave people something to think. I mean, be honest, if they were sitting in the park knitting, they weren't sitting together campaigning against the war, were they really? On there, and it's sort of there. and there were all sorts of things going on with this. Like I said, the First Lady, Mrs. Wilson, I mean, she arranged for the sheep on the White House lawn. I never have thought of that one there, but I could see her point. I mean, they wanted sheep in the capital. They wanted sheep. They needed sheep to make the wool, and yeah, they could graze them on the White House lawn. All sorts of things going on. I'm going to say the same is true today. I mean, crafting is still helpful for the same sort of reasons. I mean, I've done things like make blankets. I've seen campaigns for making blankets for refugees and for there. I mean, oh well, make a square. We need blankets for these people who have escaped this situation. Well, look, would you knit us a square, and we'll organize and we'll sort of organize some other groups to sew the set squares together, and we'll get some blankets. Or other ones I've seen is vests for refugee, so like little vests or little tops, knitted tops for refugee children. More recently, we've seen things like worry worms. The idea being that you give them to children, let them tell their worries to this knitted worm on there. Then, of course, there's always been things like twiddlers for those with dementia, chemo caps, like really soft knitted hats for those who have lost their hair due to chemotherapy. I've seen patterns for garments that give dignity to stillborn children on there. Those are things which you've got to have a certain amount of strong stomach to do that. A certain amount of constitutional strength to do something like that, I think. Then there's things like octopuses. Yeah, because if you're talking about the 8 elements of well-being and you want something to remind the children that you've taught the 8 elements of well-being to, you give them an octopus, and each tentacle of the octopus is supposed to remind them of one of the 8 elements of well-being. Then there's sort of nests and also, I mean, there must be 101 different ideas for things to make to help other people in challenging situations, whatever challenges that they're facing. The idea of giving dignity to a stillborn, so that the parents have something to actually that actually makes the child they've just lost look halfway decent, look reasonably normal. Is able to wrap them up in something that makes them look, like I say, gives the child some dignity, and therefore helps the parents on that one. And then, of course, is the idea of warm, woolly hats for the homeless. Warm clothing. To say 101 different things for charity, and that's before we start thinking about doing things for the family and spoiling the grandkids with toys, or providing them with or as my grandma used to do, she sometimes used to knit us knit us our grey cardigans for school on there. And she would, and because she'd done them herself, she was actually able to put in the stripes that made up the uniform. This sort of our uniform was supposed to have 2 narrow gold stripes on it, and she was able to add those stripes into the places where they were supposed to be, because she'd done them herself, which is something you couldn't do if you bought them from the shop, unless you went to the very expensive shop that sold the school uniform. But then you see, crafting it's so versatile. And there, in that one, you've got those pictures there. You've got the women, got the men doing the crafting. Not just the women. All right, they're doing something that maybe most men would think is a woman's craft, being linked to textiles, as most men prefer to make things using wood or metal, and women tend to go for yarn and fabric and paper, and men tend to go for things made of concrete, wood, metal. Doesn't necessarily, there's nothing wrong. It's just no reason why either gender couldn't use anything. It's just their personal preference, and there's nothing wrong with personal preference as long as it's somebody, as long as it is a choice, isn't it? On there. And so they were able to make all sorts of things that helped other people. And in the case of those soldiers, they were actually able to do things to help themselves. And you see, that's the idea of the broken pencils. If you've actually had chance to see what it says on the website, which I rather stupidly didn't have prepared, so that I could show you on there. But I do have, when I look carefully, a copy of the text that I wrote and put on the front page, and I actually put this one there, and it says on the I'll read this. Is from the front page of the Broken Pencils website. The thing with broken pencils is that one long pencil can become two short ones. Yes, there is a point at one end and a straight cut at the other, but you can turn the splintered end into a point, a usable pencil. You can also keep using the point, despite it not being a straight end. Yes, damaged. Yes, more likely to be uncomfortable and even hard to handle because it is splintered, but it is still usable. The splintered bit that has the flat end has a lot of work to do to be trimmed, refined and sharpened, but eventually there is a little evidence of the break. We have a choice. Which approach do we take to trauma? Are we like the end that was splintered but has now been sharpened, that still looks like a pencil once it has some attention? Or are we like the point which keeps on being used despite its obvious wound and bears the scars forever? It takes courage to be the one with the splintered end that is brought back into a useful service. The knife is sharp, and it sometimes feels like bits are being ripped off. The end result, though, is a pencil that is usable but does not look or behave as if it has had an injury. And subheading, Crafting Your Way to Recovery. The Broken Pencils Craft Group is for those who have faced trauma of one kind or another and are determined to put a new point on the splintered end. They want to turn the splintered end into a usable point, but they do not know how to do it. The thing is that they know they need to do something because life with the wound is hard. Sometimes others around them feel the splinters and they regret it, but have no idea how to stop it from happening again. Those of us who have been involved in crafting for some time know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it is good for us. It has such an amazing range of benefits that a physiotherapist from Shropshire came up with this medical definition. Knitting is a bilateral, rhythmic, psychosocial intervention. It is an intervention as it is not a medicine and not a treatment, but it has health benefits. It is bilateral as it uses both sides of the body. It is rhythmic due to the clickety-clack of the needles. It is psychosocial as it is a knitting group that does you good because of the social connection it generates. Get involved. It is not just knitting because all sorts of crafts can be beneficial. Making things gives you a chance to think and to express yourself in a way that helps you work through the healing process. The aim of the Broken Pencils Craft Group is that you come as you are, and everyone can craft. Set up the room with craft activities designed to help you move forwards in the healing process. Yes, you can have fun at the same time. We do not promise miracles, although we would love to see them. We do promise that we will do our best to help you take steps forwards, even if they are baby steps. If this sounds interesting, come along to the Pennyforth Youth and Community Centre on the 4th of June. That's the first Sunday in June at 2 p.m. Oh, and by the way, if you do come along, we'd appreciate a donation of at least £5 per person to help us cover our costs. See, because we're putting the craft materials out, we might even end up putting our own tables out. Yes, it depends. We'll have to wait and see on that one. Might end up putting our own tables out because they're not always they're not always easy to get out of the store cupboard. So on there, so we might have a few tables out, a few chairs out, and you'll be able to be able to do some curious and interesting things on there and get to know a few people from roundabout. So if that interests you, come along to that. Oh yes, yeah, it's it'll I think it's going it I think it'll be a good afternoon. Time to get to know a few people. And yes, there is a leaflet up in the co-op and in the spa and in the pharmacy. So if you want to check those out and remind yourself of that, that's where you check. And do you know what? I've made them all the leaflets. I've made them green. You can't see how green they are here on that sheet, but they're all green. So at least you'll be able to see them. So look around for the green leaflet and see what you can find. And you are more than welcome to come along. Bye.